Welcome back to Beginning Sock Knitting, the Sock Knit Along with the Twisted Skein. I'm Amanda Swanson, your instructor for this course. This is going to be our first cast on video. Today I'm going to be casting on a sock using a pair of double pointed needles. These are aluminum. The first thing we're going to do is figure out how big of a swatch to make for our sock. It is important to swatch when you're making socks because you want to make sure that once you put that sock on, it's going to fit without either slipping down around your ankles or binding your ankle so tightly that it causes pain and swelling. So we're going to do a swatch. I'm going to go ahead and look at my label because I know I want a swatch that is knit in the round and I want it to be about 6 inches around. So if I look here, my label says that with the yarn I'm using, which is a worsted weight yarn, and size 8 needles, if I cast on 20 stitches, my swatch should be 4 inches around. Well, I want a 6-inch swatch, so I'm going to go ahead and count on using 30 stitches because that's 5 stitches an inch times 6 inches equals 30 stitches for 6 inches. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and cast on 30 stitches on my double pointed needles. I'm going to start this sock with a long tail cast on. You want a sock cast on that is nice and stretchy so that your sock has room to fit over your heel. I'm going to go ahead and put my yarn in the slingshot position. I take my first double pointed needle, wrap the yarn around the needle, and then that gives me 1 stitch, and now I'm going to cast 10 more stitches on this needle. I'm going to cast onto 3 needles, 10 stitches each, for a total of 30 stitches. Now you'll notice I'm not sliding my stitches all the way down the needle. I'm leaving a little space, using my finger as a guide, between each stitch, and that helps me keep my cast on loose. I'm using the long tail cast on method, and now that I've got that first needle ready to go, I'm going to move on to the second one. You're going to go ahead and keep your needles parallel. I'm going to start again scooping up the yarn that is around my thumb, coming up and grabbing the yarn that is over my index finger, pulling it down, and I'm using the tension of the yarn to snug that stitch up next to the other needle. This will make a nice tight cast on with no gaps between your needles. Some people have a problem with what's called laddering when they knit on 3 double point needles or 4 double pointed needles, and this will help prevent that laddering from happening, keeping a good tight space between your needles, but then allowing it to be looser away from the ends of your stitches. Okay, I've got 8, 9, 10. That's needle 2. You'll notice this needle is resting on the table. That way it's not dropping my stitches. And I'm going to now line up the third needle. Again, pick up from my thumb over my index finger. If you want more help with the long tail cast on, we have a video link you can follow, and that'll take you to another video on the long tail cast on. And then a little bit later in this series, I'm going to teach you my favorite sock cast on, which is the twisted German. And I find that makes a really nice, stretchy, and very attractive edge. Almost done with this. Okay. All right, I've got 30 stitches on my needle all together, and what I'm doing now is very carefully, so that you can see I'm keeping all my cast-ons nice and straight. Oh, that one wanted to twist. I'm keeping all my cast-on edges on the same side of the needle. I'm going to bring them together in a triangle, and I'm going to slide them all the way up onto the needles so that they stay in place. That's not twisted. And now I'm going to come on over here, and I'm going to start working in the round. Taking my 4th double pointed needle, and I'm going to start knitting from my first end and closing the gap on this in the round. All right. Now, if you want to go ahead and just cast your sock on here, if you know how many stitches you need, that's fine. You can go ahead and start ribbing. but I'm going to start with a swatch here. And so I'm going to start working just in knit stitch. And you want to swatch in this pattern of knitting that you're most likely to use for the body of your sock. I'm going to do a ribbed top, and then I'm going to do a stockinette body, just knit stitches around. So I want my swatch to be in stockinette because I want to be sure that that's what fits me when my swatch is done. So I'm just going to go ahead and knit. I'm going to show you a little bit of how I go around. Now with the two-pointed or double-pointed needles, it's really important to snug up those gaps. I'm going to go ahead and bring the needle in my left hand up on top so that I can snug these stitches up, and I'm going to pull extra tight on the first 2 stitches of this round. That's going to help me close any gaps so I don't get ladders in my work. Okay, keep working across each needle. And if you find that your needles are sliding out of your stitches, you can try using bamboo needles or other wood needles. Those are a little grippier. Also, carbon fiber needles have a little more grip to them. The other thing you can do is keep your work laying flat on a table. That is also going to give your stitches less opportunity to slip and for your needles to run away. All right, another gap here. Again, bring the needle in my left hand up on top. I'm going to insert my needle to knit here, and the first 2 stitches I'm going to pull extra tight just to close up any gapping I would get. Almost to the end. You'll notice I'm using a nice bright colored yarn. When you start knitting socks, you want to use a bright or light colored yarn that isn't too fuzzy so you can see your stitches easily. You can see I've gotten to the end here. This stitch is a little big, but that's just my tail. When I pull my tail down, it snugs back up. Now, the tricky thing about working on double-pointed needles is it's really hard to put a stitch marker on the end of your needle to mark where your beginning of round is. So when I'm working in the round, I like to go ahead and hang my stitch marker on the first stitch of my round. Let me get one here. I have here a nice bulb safety pin. I like to use these because you can either use them to mark your place, they can go in and out of stitches, or you can use them to hold stitches in place should you drop one. So I'm just going to put this around the very first stitch at the beginning of round so I know every time I come to the end of the round. All right, and from here you can just keep knitting away. You're going to knit this swatch until it's about 3 inches wide, and then you can bind it off. All right, and I'll come back and show you a loose bind off. All right, now I'm back with my swatch, and we can see I'm going to measure from the base of my loops here. I've got 3 inches of knitting, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to bind this swatch off, and then we're going to block it. I'm going to come up here. Now the important thing when you are casting off a sock swatch is to cast off loosely. You want this bind off edge to be stretchy so that you can actually try this swatch on. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to pull that yarn a little extra when we pull the first stitch over the second. Okay, knit one, lift the stitch on your right needle over the stitch on your left, and I like to give that a little extra stretch when I do that. A little extra stretch here to bring some extra yarn into the stitch on my right needle. Just to keep that bind off loose. Again, I give a little extra stretch on the right. Knit the next stitch, pull the right stitch over the left. You see how I roll the needle on my right here to bring out that extra yarn. That's what gives me enough space to have a stretchy edge. A lot of people find if they have too tight a bind-off edge, they can't try their swatch on. This will keep your bind-off nice and loose. I'm going to go ahead and work around here. Alright, we're down to the last couple stitches. I'm going to continue to cast these off as I have been doing all the way around. I come to the last stitch. I'm just going to cut my yarn, pull it through the end of the stitch, and you can see I've now got cast off all the way around. I'm not going to worry about that join there. This is just my swatch, but you can see nice stretchy bind off there and a good stretchy cast on over here. So this swatch is now ready for blocking. Next video is going to be how to cast on 2 circular needles, and I'm going to demonstrate using the twisted German for that cast on, so I hope you'll join me.